everyone, and welcome. My name is Sandra Schleier. I am the founder and co-editor-in-chief of Reefbites, a blog dedicated to increasing coral reef literacy in the general public. In collaboration with Everblue, I will be continuing our Researchers and Writers webinar and share with you how to write science for the general public. Now, our mission at Reefbites is to make coral reef-related research accessible to a broader audience. Now, this webinar is going to focus on the writing guidelines our writers use to come up with their articles. And these guidelines have been adapted by Dr. Carrie Mugdeno, who welcomed me as a writer and Spanish translator at Ocean Bites, and then inspired me to create Reefbites. So how do we write science for the general public? Where do we begin? As scientists, this can often be a challenge and a struggle because we are used to being in our community bubble where everybody speaks the same language, everybody knows the technical terms, we speak about our research every day, and this is how we get inspired, this is how we figure things out. But then how do we step out of that bubble and communicate our science in a much simpler way for the general public to understand? And this is very important because our science has a purpose, and it's to make people's lives better. And if we want to do this, the general public has to understand what we are doing, right? And what our science is about. Once they begin to understand it, then they can start to care about it and have a sense of why this is important in their daily lives. So the first thing that we have to do as science writers, we have to captivate our audience. And we do this by having a short, sweet, and creative title. Something that when you're scrolling on social media, it catches your attention, it catches your eye. So for example, not only a human nightmare, coral tumor-like disease. This is something that, gives you a little bit of surprise, like what? Wait, so tumors are not only human related, they can happen to corals as well. And so that kind of title makes you want to click on the article and want to read more. So now the second thing you have to do is, continue to captivate their attention. And you do this by having two important things in the first paragraph, and that is your major finding and the importance of that major finding. So scientists at this point are going to be like, wait, what? The major finding is usually at the end, in the conclusions and then discussion about that conclusion. But when you want to write science for the general public, you need that major finding to be your hook. You need people to know, what is that major finding? And if they're interested, then they'll want to know how you come up with it. Why are those your results? Number two, you have to make it easy to understand. You have to remember that you have a target audience, and your target audience is everyone from different backgrounds, any age, any different academic backgrounds as well. Something that is a general rule for me is that I want to make sure my grandparents understand the science, but also my nieces and nephews. And they're not out of high school yet, so it takes me a little bit more to explain science, my science to them, but I want everybody to be able to understand. And it's a really good practice when you have all those different target audiences. It's really important that you write clearly and you avoid complicated sentence structure. Why? Because a really long and complicated sentence is not easy to read, and it's not something that people want to do. So for example, you have coral reefs are among the most species-rich, productive, and economically valuable ecosystems on Earth, but increasingly frequent pantropical coral bleaching events are threatening their persistence on a global scale. I got tired just reading that, and that is one huge sentence. So let's make it easier and say coral reefs are home to many different organisms. They provide coastal communities with food and tourism opportunities. Unfortunately, as the ocean becomes warmer, coral reefs around the world are threatened. That was much easier to read. instead of one huge and complicated sentence, you have 3 different sentences. And also, all of that technical jargon can be reduced and just, say the most important thing. As a rule of thumb, if it's not pertinent, leave it out. If it's not important, leave it out. Okay, we want only the important things to, to be present, so people can just take that take-home message. You should always use the active voice in your writing as well, and avoid the be verbs whenever possible. So the be verbs are am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been. Okay, and we want to avoid those because active verbs are much better and it engages the reader in a different way. So just let's use like measured, considered, and all those other active verbs. So for example, instead of saying the shark growth data was collected over a period of 2 years, it's more engaging to say Dr. Schleier collected shark growth data over a period of 2 years. It also makes it a little bit more personal, and you introduce those characters to the audience. Instead of saying it was observed that orca whales prey on great white sharks, we observed that orca whales prey on great white sharks. So it's through research, talk about you too, right? So we observed that orca whales prey on great white sharks. That is much easier to read. Also, when we want to write, do things easy to understand, make everything clearly, you also want to know what jargon is. So for us, jargon are those technical terms, and it's all those words that we learn after high school that have to do with specifically with what we work on. So it's not something that everyone is going to know unless you're in the same field. So AGU Sharing Science came up with this set of questions, and if you check any of those boxes, then that means that the word you are using is a jargon. So let's go over them really quick. So do you only use it when talking about your science? Does it have a different meaning in a day-to-day conversation? Are friends, neighbors, relatives in a different profession unable to explain or define it? When you defend using it, do you say things like everyone should know what it means? Is it serving as a barrier to communication instead of a bridge? If you check any of these boxes, that means that technical term is definitely jargon. And if it's jargon, it's something that we do not really want to have in our writing. However, sometimes we do have to include it. So what do we do with jargon? And that's the third thing. What can we do with it that is easier to use in our writing? So one thing you can do is that when you mention it, you can link it to a definition or video that explains the technical term. Visual explanations are much better than written ones. So if there is a chance that there's a YouTube video that can explain the concept, by all means, link it to that word. If you are going to use it, but you can't link it to anything, then provide a really brief definition the first time you use it. Also, remember that there are words that have both a daily use and a scientific meaning. For example, for us, scientists, when we talk about crust, it can mean the outermost layer of a planet. However, the public meaning is thinking about pizza, the edge of a pizza or pie. That is the crust. If we talk about the word surf, for marine sciences, that's the line of foam on seashore from breaking waves. But if you're speaking to someone from the general public, that could just definitely be, riding a surfboard. That's what surf means. If we talk about dating, for scientists, that could be determining age. But for the public, it means the beginning stages in a relationship. So we always have to remember that some of our words as well, even though they're from daily use, can have both a scientific and daily use meaning. So we always have to watch those words. And AGU Sharing Science has a lot of great examples. These 3 were just my favorites. So thank you, AGU, for helping out with science communication, because this is definitely something that we have to watch out for. Number 4, keeping your audience engaged. So they're already reading your science. Now we just have to keep them engaged so they're able to finish the article. And for this, there are ways that you can make your writing a little bit just easier to read. So for example, you can use descriptive headings to separate your post into short digestible paragraphs. So kind of just mentioning, so this paragraph is, or these couple of paragraphs are going to be part of the introduction. However, you don't have to say introduction. You can come up with a more creative word like let's talk specifics, or this is the beginning. So you can be creative in those like descriptive headings. However, they separate the different types of paragraphs that you have in your article. Always begin your paragraph with a topic sentence. Now, this is very important. Each paragraph must have a topic sentence. And a topic sentence is a sentence that kind of summarizes the whole paragraph. So in that topic sentence, which often takes a while to write down, is where you're going to just summarize that whole paragraph. And then the rest of the paragraph is just giving information that support that topic sentence. Also, it's really important that when you finish a paragraph, it links to the second paragraph. So always just, you're going to write short, concise paragraphs that link to one another. So that way it's easier for the reader to understand. Always relate your science to a common knowledge event. Sometimes we're talking about them in the methods section. We're kind of finding, methodology can often be really hard to explain. And something that, is good with the audience and your readers is that if you relate it to a common thing. So for example, relating how a car works to some methodology in your paper. It's something that is a common event. And so people know about it. So people already know how that works. And when you're correlating it and comparing it, people are like, oh, okay, so like I get it now. So there's that click. So if you use like a common knowledge event, then you can kind of make it easier for the person to understand what it is that's happening, or how that methodology was done. Always do interesting facts in bold. And that is something that just kind of pops. Think about a magazine when you're reading an article on an actress or something, or fashion, and you have these like cool quotes or citations in bold. Or so for science, we can do that with interesting facts, and it really catches the reader's eye and kind of also makes them remember that cool fact. You can also use fun visuals to complement your writing, and always include easy to understand captions. So if you do have visuals, have that caption. So just people know what that picture is about. Number 5, and so lastly, number 5, make it a story. People are reading about your science, but if you make it interesting and you make it a story, it's much easier to read, but it's also much easier to understand. And people like reading an article and being told something new. So to make it a story, it has to have a beginning. And in the beginning, you have to have that major finding and give a sense of why people should care about your science. So definitely include, why is it important, and kind of just, inspire people to care about it. It's like, oh, I should care about this because this affects me in this way. Then you have your middle, and your middle is your simple details on the methods. So try to be as brief and simple as possible. Mention the cool parts, and try to always use that language that's just easier to understand, related to a common knowledge event, whatever makes it easier and, makes it interesting. And then you have your end. And in your end, you conclude with restating your major finding, but this time you add a little bit more information, and always link it back to why is it important. But now in the end, you also want to include what comes next. What comes next, because that makes people interested in like, oh, so this is going to come next. And now you made them part of the adventure, and they they're hooked and they want to know more. So anyways, these were the 5 major guidelines that I'd like to share with you. Hopefully you guys use it. We will be giving out a handout, so check that out. And you can find it on our website as well at Everblue and at Reefbites. So thank you guys and hope this helps. Bye.